People always say every child deserves to feel wanted, but I learned very early in life that some kids grow up feeling like accidents nobody knows what to do with. My existence came from one careless night between two people who barely understood each other, and if my grandparents hadn't pressured them into marriage, I doubt I would have ever been born at all. From the beginning, I never felt like a daughter. I felt like a burden they were forced to carry. My father never even tried to hide how much resentment he carried toward me. Every time he looked at me, it was like I reminded him of some dream he lost. Sometimes he would mutter under his breath about how his life had been ruined too early, and even as a little girl, I understood I was the reason he felt trapped. My mother wasn't loud or violent, but in many ways, her silence hurt even more. She never hugged me, never brushed my hair lovingly, never smiled at me the way other mothers smiled at their children. It was like I lived in the house without truly belonging there. By the time I was 7, I had already learned the most important rule of survival in that house. Don't become a problem. I walked quietly through hallways, kept my voice low, stayed in my room whenever possible, and tried not to ask for anything. I thought maybe if I stayed invisible enough, my father would stop glaring at me like I had stolen his future. But nothing I did ever changed the way they saw me. Then everything shifted the year my little sister was born. Her name was Savannah, and from the moment she entered the world, my parents treated her like a miracle sent from heaven. I still remember hearing my mother cry tears of happiness while holding her in the hospital. My father smiled more in one day than I had seen him smile during my entire childhood. Suddenly the house felt warmer, happier, brighter, but only for her. I became the extra child nobody paid attention to anymore. Riley, keep an eye on your sister. Riley, stop making noise. Savannah is sleeping. Riley, why can't you act more like Savannah? Everything in the house revolved around her. She wore brand new clothes while I wore old hand-me-downs from neighbors and distant relatives. She got birthday cakes covered in decorations, while I got a single candle stuck into whatever food happened to be in the kitchen. She received hugs, kisses, praise, and excitement. I received chores and silence. One afternoon, when I was around 10 years old, I finally asked my mother something I had been wondering for years. Did I do something wrong? She looked at me for a few seconds with tired eyes, then let out a slow sigh before walking away without answering. That silence told me everything. After a while, I stopped expecting love from them. I stopped imagining family dinners filled with laughter or birthdays that felt special. I convinced myself that maybe some people just weren't meant to be loved. But even after giving up on them, I never stopped dreaming about a different future for myself. I became good at fading into the background. If something broke in the house, I fixed it. If dishes piled up, I cleaned them. If laundry needed folding, I folded it. By the time I turned 8, my mother had already handed me a mop and told me the house would be my responsibility from then on. At first, it started small. Sweeping floors, cleaning tables, washing dishes. But year after year, the workload kept growing until I practically became the unpaid maid of the household. I scrubbed bathrooms, washed clothes, vacuumed carpets, cooked dinners, and handled every task nobody else wanted to do. My mother barely cleaned anymore because she knew I would eventually take care of everything. Riley, you missed a spot on the kitchen floor. Riley, the laundry still isn't folded. Riley, hurry up and start dinner. Not once did anyone thank me. Meanwhile, Savannah lived like a princess. If she pointed at a toy in a store, my parents bought it. If she wanted new clothes, they appeared the next day. I remember asking for a new backpack once because mine had holes near the zipper and books kept slipping out. My mother looked at me like I had asked for something ridiculous. "Your old one still works," she said coldly. A week later, Savannah walked into the house carrying a sparkling designer backpack covered in glittery stars. But honestly, the hardest part was never the material things. It was watching the way my parents loved her, the way my father smiled proudly whenever she brought home good grades, the way my mother brushed Savannah's hair gently while calling her beautiful. I could spend an entire day cleaning the house and cooking dinner, and nobody would even ask whether I had eaten yet. Still, there was one thing in my life that made me feel alive: cooking. The first thing I ever made completely on my own was scrambled eggs and toast when I was 9 years old. It wasn't impressive, but I still remember how proud I felt watching butter melt across warm bread while the smell filled the kitchen. For the first time in my life, I had created something that brought comfort instead of criticism. After that, cooking became my escape. Whenever my mother cooked, I secretly watched everything she did. I memorized measurements, techniques, timing, and ingredients. Then I practiced whenever nobody was around. Over the years, I slowly became better and better until preparing full meals became second nature to me. When I was 13, I made baked pasta completely from scratch for dinner one night. Savannah took one bite and immediately smiled. "This tastes amazing," she said. For a second, my heart lifted. Then my mother laughed and looked proudly at my father. "I think I finally perfected the recipe," she said. I opened my mouth because I wanted to tell them I was the one who made it. I wanted credit just once in my life, but I stayed quiet. Shadows don't get recognized. So I swallowed the hurt and kept telling myself the same thing I had repeated for years. One day, I'll find somewhere I truly belong. As I got older, I started realizing that being ignored had changed me in ways other people couldn't see. I stopped talking about my feelings because nobody ever listened anyway. I stopped asking for help because I already knew the answer would be disappointment. Most nights, I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, imagining a future where I didn't have to feel invisible anymore. I wanted to become a chef, not just someone who cooked meals in a tiny family kitchen, but someone whose food people remembered long after they finished eating. Whenever I had free time after school, I watched cooking shows online and copied recipes into old notebooks I kept hidden under my bed. I practiced knife skills with cheap vegetables and experimented with sauces whenever the house was empty. Cooking was the only thing that made me feel important. I dreamed about opening a restaurant someday. I pictured a warm place filled with laughter, good food, and people who actually appreciated my work. A place where I didn't feel like an unwanted ghost walking around somebody else's life. But the first time I shared that dream out loud, my family laughed at me. "A restaurant?" My father scoffed while shaking his head. "You think you're some celebrity chef now?" "Most restaurants fail," my mother added dismissively. "You should think about getting a normal career instead. Something stable." Then Savannah smirked from across the table. "You could always work at a fast food drive-thru," she said. "They hire cooks too." The three of them laughed together while I sat there pretending their words didn't hurt. But no matter how much they mocked me, I refused to give up on that dream. To my surprise, my father eventually agreed to pay for culinary school after I graduated high school, though he made sure to remind me it came with conditions. "This is the last thing you'll ever get from us," he told me coldly. "The house, the savings, everything else belongs to Savannah. Don't expect anything after this." Oddly enough, hearing that didn't crush me the way he expected. It relieved me. I didn't want their money anymore. I didn't want their approval either. I only wanted one chance to build a life that belonged to me. And culinary school became the first place where I finally felt human. Nobody there cared about family favorites or golden children. Nobody compared me to Savannah. The only thing that mattered was talent and discipline. For the first time in my life, people actually noticed my hard work. I stayed up late practicing recipes long after classes ended. I learned flavor combinations, kitchen management, food presentation, and advanced cooking techniques. My instructors praised my determination, and every compliment felt strange because I wasn't used to being seen. For the first time, I began believing maybe I truly had a future. I imagined graduating, finding steady work in a professional kitchen, saving money little by little, and eventually opening my own restaurant someday. But reality hit harder than I expected after graduation. I had no savings, no apartment, no support system, so despite everything inside me screaming not to do it, I had no choice except return to my parents' house temporarily. The moment I walked through the front door carrying my culinary diploma, I realized nothing had changed. "Well, look at that," my mother said in a fake, cheerful voice. "Our little chef is finally home." My father barely looked up from the television. Savannah grinned. "So now you can cook for us every night professionally." They laughed like it was the funniest joke in the world. I quietly carried my bags upstairs to my old room, the same tiny room with faded wallpaper and a squeaky bed frame I'd slept on since childhood. I hung my diploma on the wall and stared at it for a long time. I had worked so hard to escape this place, and somehow I had ended up right back inside it. That night, while sitting alone in my room, I made myself a promise. "This is temporary. One day I'll leave for good and I'll never come back. Life settled into a painful routine after that. During the day, I worked exhausting shifts at a small restaurant downtown. The pay wasn't great, but I needed the experience badly, so I pushed through 12-hour days without complaining. Then I'd come home exhausted only to find my mother waiting with more chores. Don't forget the bathrooms still need cleaning. The laundry basket is full. You're making dinner tonight, right? It almost felt laughable. I had spent my entire life serving that family, and even as an adult, nothing had changed. Meanwhile, Savannah continued living like royalty. When she reached her senior year of high school, my father surprised her with a brand new white SUV parked in the driveway with a giant red bow on top. I still remember standing near the front porch watching sunlight reflect off the polished paint while she screamed excitedly and hugged him. "My princess deserves the best," he said proudly, while handing her the keys. I stood there quietly staring at the car, feeling something heavy settle in my chest. At her age, owning a car had never even felt possible for me. I walked to work or borrowed rusty bikes whenever I needed transportation. Once, I mentioned saving up for a used vehicle someday, and my parents laughed directly in my face. "With what money?" my father asked mockingly. "You can barely support yourself," my mother added. I desperately wanted to move out, but every paycheck disappeared almost as fast as I earned it. My mother constantly demanded money for house expenses. "You live here," she'd remind me. "You should contribute." It didn't matter that I cleaned the entire house, cooked every meal, and handled responsibilities nobody else touched. To them, I was still someone who owed them more. Then Christmas came, and somehow that holiday became the moment everything finally changed. For months, I had secretly saved money trying to buy meaningful gifts for everyone, despite the way they treated me. But when I saw the expensive presents my parents bought for Savannah, designer jewelry, the newest phone model, luxury makeup sets, I realized there was no way I could compete financially. So instead, I bought lottery tickets, not cheap scratch-offs, but official tickets for the biggest jackpot drawing of the year. Part of me knew it was silly, but another part of me quietly hoped maybe luck would finally visit my life for once. On Christmas morning, I placed small envelopes at everyone's seats during breakfast. Inside each envelope was a lottery ticket. Nobody smiled. Nobody thanked me. My father looked at the ticket with confusion before raising an eyebrow. "Seriously, Riley?" he asked. "Lottery tickets? What a waste of money," my mother muttered. Savannah burst out laughing before tossing her envelope onto the table. "You're so broke you couldn't even buy real presents." The three of them laughed together while I sat there frozen in silence. Then my mother smiled sweetly in the cruelest way possible. "Well," she said, "since Riley didn't buy actual gifts this year, I guess she shouldn't expect anything either." Everyone agreed immediately. Something inside me cracked. Without saying another word, I reached across the table and grabbed every lottery ticket back from their hands. "You know what?" I whispered shakily. "I'll keep them myself." Then I walked out of the house before anyone could respond. That Christmas hurt more than any holiday before it, because it finally forced me to accept something I had avoided my entire life. I was never truly part of that family. A few days after Christmas, I stopped thinking about the lottery tickets completely. I had shoved them into the pocket of my winter coat and tossed it across the chair in my room without another thought. Winning anything never even crossed my mind. People like me didn't get lucky. That was how life had always worked. Then one afternoon, during my lunch break at the restaurant, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. I figured it was probably spam or some telemarketer trying to sell me something I couldn't afford anyway. But for some reason, I answered at the last second. "Hello, is this Riley Mercer?" The woman's professional tone instantly made me sit up straighter. "Yes? This is Denise Carter from the state lottery office. I'm calling regarding a winning ticket registered under your name." For a second, my brain stopped working. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your ticket matched all winning numbers from the Christmas jackpot drawing," she continued calmly. "After taxes, your total payout comes to $2,500,000. Everything around me blurred. The sounds of the kitchen faded into the background while my hands started trembling around the phone. I honestly thought I had misunderstood her at first. $2.5 million. That number didn't even feel real. As Denise explained the process for claiming the money, my chest tightened harder and harder. My entire life had been about surviving one paycheck at a time, worrying about bills, cleaning houses that never felt like home, and trying not to take up too much space in other people's lives. And suddenly, with one phone call, everything had changed. When the call ended, I just sat there staring at the wall in silence. I wanted to tell someone. I wanted somebody to hug me or celebrate with me or simply say they were happy for me. But I didn't really have anyone, and that loneliness led me to make the biggest mistake of my life. I told my family. That night, I walked into the kitchen while everyone was eating dinner. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. "I won the lottery," I said quietly. Nobody reacted at first. Then my father frowned. "What?" "I won," I repeated. "The jackpot." Savannah slowly lowered her fork. "How much?" I swallowed hard. 2.5 million after taxes. The room went completely silent. My mother's eyes widened. My father stared at me like he had forgotten who I was. Savannah practically jumped out of her chair. "Wait," she blurted out. "Those were the tickets you bought for us on Christmas." A cold feeling spread through my stomach. "No," I said carefully. "I took them back, remember? But they were meant for the family," Savannah argued immediately. "That means the money belongs to all of us." I stared at her in disbelief. "You all laughed at them," I reminded her. My father slowly set his fork down and leaned back in his chair. "Riley," he said in a suddenly calm voice, "you live under this roof. Families should help each other. This money could benefit all of us." My mother quickly joined in with a fake sweetness that made my skin crawl. "Honey, you don't understand how to manage that much money," she said gently. "Your father and I can protect it for you." I actually laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because hearing them pretend to care felt so unbelievable it almost sounded absurd. "Don't do that," I said coldly. "Don't suddenly act like you love me now." Savannah crossed her arms angrily. "You're being selfish." I looked at her. "Selfish? You owe this family," she snapped. "You've lived here your whole life while Mom and Dad paid for everything." Something inside me finally broke completely. "I owe you?" I repeated quietly. "I spent my childhood cleaning your messes. I cooked every meal in this house. Mom took money from my paychecks constantly, but now that I finally have something good happen to me, suddenly I'm selfish?" My father's face darkened immediately. "If you're going to speak like that," he warned, "then maybe you shouldn't stay here anymore." I stared at him. For a second, I honestly thought I had heard him wrong. "What?" My mother stood up slowly with her arms folded. "If you're not willing to help this family financially, then you need to leave," she said coldly. "You have money now. Go take care of yourself." I looked around the kitchen at all three of them. Not one person looked guilty. Not one person looked sad. And in that moment, something strange happened inside me. Instead of heartbreak, I felt relief, because for the first time in my life, everything finally became clear. They had never seen me as their daughter. I was useful when I cleaned their house, useful when I cooked their meals, useful when I handed over my paychecks. But the second I stopped serving them, I became disposable. I took a long breath and nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. "I'll leave." Nobody stopped me. Nobody apologized. I walked upstairs calmly, packed my clothes into 2 bags, grabbed my documents, and carefully placed the winning lottery ticket inside my purse. Then I stood at the front door for one final moment. My family watched silently from the kitchen. "Thank you," I said quietly. They looked confused. "Thanks to all of you, I finally understand something." I wrapped my fingers around the doorknob. I never belonged here. Then I walked out into the freezing winter night without looking back. The cold air hit my face hard as I stepped onto the sidewalk carrying everything I owned inside 2 bags. I had no plan, no apartment, no family to call, and no idea what would happen next. But for the first time in my life, I felt free. The next morning, my first stop was the lottery office. I needed to make sure nobody could ever take that money from me. The moment I officially signed the paperwork and saw the amount transferred into my account, it stopped feeling like fantasy. That money wasn't just cash. It was my escape, my second chance, and unlike my family, I wasn't going to waste it trying to impress people. I rented a small apartment outside downtown Chicago. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, quiet, and most importantly, mine. The first night I slept there, I cried alone in the dark because I had never experienced peace like that before. No yelling, no criticism, no footsteps outside my bedroom door demanding chores. Just silence. For weeks afterward, I spent nearly every hour researching how restaurants worked beyond the kitchen itself. I studied permits, suppliers, payroll systems, business licenses, marketing strategies, interior design, staffing, and budgeting. I knew one thing for certain. If I was going to build a future, I was going to build it correctly. After searching for nearly a month, I found an abandoned restaurant property in a busy part of the city. The building looked terrible. The floors were cracked, the walls smelled damp, and the kitchen equipment was outdated. But when I stood inside that empty space, I could already picture what it could become. The landlord laughed when I told him my plans. "You really think you can make this place successful?" he asked. I smiled calmly. "I know I can." I threw myself into rebuilding that place from the ground up. Every morning started before sunrise and ended long after midnight. I met with contractors, argued with suppliers, tested paint colors, selected lighting fixtures, and spent hours sketching table layouts because I wanted the restaurant to feel warm instead of flashy. I didn't want people walking in and feeling intimidated. I wanted them to feel comforted. For the first time in my life, I was creating a place where people would feel welcome. And maybe deep down, I was building the kind of home I had never been given. I stayed heavily involved in every detail. I helped choose the wood for the tables, sampled hundreds of ingredients from different vendors, and redesigned the kitchen 3 separate times before I was satisfied. Some nights I slept on a folding chair inside the unfinished building because I was too exhausted to drive back to my apartment. But I didn't care. Every second of work felt worth it. When the sign finally went up outside the building, I stood across the street staring at it for nearly 10 minutes. Mercer's Kitchen. My name. Something that belonged to me. I honestly thought I might cry right there on the sidewalk. Opening day terrified me more than anything I had ever experienced. My stomach twisted the entire morning while I waited for customers to arrive. I kept imagining worst-case scenarios. What if nobody came? What if people hated the food? What if my family had been right about me all along? Then the front door opened. An older couple walked inside holding hands. They ordered slowly, smiled politely, and thanked me when I personally delivered their meals. I watched nervously from the kitchen while they tasted the food. And then the woman smiled. Not a fake smile. A real one. She leaned toward her husband and whispered something before both of them started eating faster. That tiny moment changed everything for me. Because for the first time in my life, something I created brought people happiness. Word spread surprisingly fast after that. Customers started recommending the restaurant online. Food bloggers posted pictures of my dishes. Local social media pages talked about the cozy atmosphere and homemade recipes. People didn't just enjoy the food, they felt something while eating it. And that mattered to me more than money ever could. Within a year, Mercer's Kitchen became one of the busiest small restaurants in the city. Reservations filled up weeks ahead, and customers regularly waited outside before opening hours. Then came the moment I never thought possible. I opened a second location. The day the second restaurant launched, I stood alone inside the empty dining room before customers arrived and thought about the little girl who used to clean kitchens while everyone ignored her existence. That girl would never have believed this life was possible. Over the next few years, everything kept growing faster than I expected. A third location opened downtown, followed by a fourth in another part of the state. My restaurants became known for comfort food with creative twists, warm service, and an atmosphere that made people feel cared for. And somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling invisible. Employees respected me. Customers appreciated me. People finally saw me. But more importantly, I started seeing myself differently too. About 4 years after I left my parents' house, I was sitting inside my office reviewing financial reports when my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it. Then I answered. "Hello?" For a second, neither of us spoke, but I recognized the breathing immediately. My mother. Hearing her voice after all those years felt like reopening a wound I thought had healed. "What do you want?" I asked calmly. She sighed softly. "It's Savannah," she said. "She's in trouble." I leaned back slowly in my chair. "What kind of trouble?" "She lost her job," my mother admitted quietly. "There were accusations, stealing from the company. Nobody wants to hire her now. She has debt collectors calling constantly, and your father's health problems have made everything worse financially." I closed my eyes for a moment, and there it was. The reason she had called? Not love. Need. "We need help, Riley," she whispered. I laughed quietly under my breath. "Now you remember I exist?" "That's not fair," she said quickly. "Really?" I asked. "Because I remember getting thrown out of the house in the middle of winter." Silence. Then she tried another approach. She's still your sister. The strange thing was that part of me still wanted to believe people could change. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it came from years of desperately wanting a real family. But despite everything, I remembered Savannah as a little girl before entitlement and cruelty consumed her. So after several long seconds, I sighed. I can offer her a job, I said carefully. But she won't get special treatment. My mother sounded instantly relieved. Thank you, sweetheart. The word sweetheart almost made me sick. A week later, Savannah started working at one of my restaurant locations in an administrative position. To my surprise, she initially seemed completely different from the person I remembered. She arrived early, stayed late, helped employees solve scheduling problems, and acted polite toward everyone. For a while, I genuinely believed she had matured. I even started wondering if maybe reconciliation between us was possible someday. Then the whispers began. At first, small comments reached me from nervous employees. Savannah said staff deserve higher pay. She mentioned you keep most profits for yourself. She said the company originally belonged to your family. None of it made sense. I treated my staff well. Most employees had been with me for years because I paid fairly and created healthy work environments. So hearing those rumors shocked me. Then one evening, my head chef, Grant, knocked on my office door looking uncomfortable. Riley, he said carefully, I think you need to know what's happening. A knot formed in my stomach instantly. What is it? He hesitated. Savannah's been encouraging employees to pressure management for massive raises, he explained. She's telling people if enough workers threaten to quit, you'll panic and give in. I stared at him silently. Anger slowly burned through my chest. I had given her a second chance, and she was trying to poison my company from the inside. But unlike the scared girl I used to be, I wasn't powerless anymore. Thank you for telling me, I said quietly. Unfortunately, things became much worse only days later. One night, my financial manager, Elise, rushed into my office looking pale and shaken. We have a serious problem, she said. I immediately stood up. What happened? Her voice dropped lower. $10,000 disappeared from the safe. My stomach tightened instantly. What? I checked the accounting records twice, she explained nervously. There's no authorized withdrawal. The cash is simply gone. I felt ice spread through my veins. Only a handful of people even had access to that safe. Me, Elise, Grant, and Savannah. I didn't want to accuse Savannah without proof, no matter how suspicious everything looked. A part of me still clung to the hope that maybe this was some misunderstanding. Maybe someone else had access I didn't know about. Maybe I was letting old wounds cloud my judgment. But another part of me already knew the truth. And that truth hurt more than I wanted to admit. I looked at Elise carefully. Does anyone else know about the missing money? She shook her head immediately. No. I wanted to talk to you first. I nodded slowly. Good. Don't mention this to anyone yet. That night, after everyone left the restaurant, I stayed behind alone in my office thinking about everything that had happened since Savannah returned to my life. The rumors, the manipulation, the growing tension among employees, and now missing cash. I felt stupid. Not because I had trusted her once when we were kids. We were children back then. I felt stupid because I had trusted her again as an adult. The next morning, I quietly contacted a security company and arranged for hidden cameras to be installed near the accounting office and safe. I didn't tell anyone except Elise. I hated doing it, but I couldn't risk losing control of the business I had spent years building with my own hands. For 5 days, nothing happened. Then late one night, while reviewing inventory reports at home, my phone buzzed with a security alert. Unusual activity detected in accounting office. My heartbeat instantly sped up. I opened the live camera feed. And there she was. Savannah. She slipped into the office carefully, looking over her shoulder before shutting the door behind her. My stomach twisted while I watched her kneel beside the safe. Her movements were calm and practiced, like she had done it before. Then she opened the safe and started stuffing stacks of cash into her designer purse. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. Even though I had suspected her, seeing it with my own eyes still felt unreal. I watched silently while she zipped her purse closed, adjusted her jacket, and walked out like nothing had happened. I sat frozen on my couch long after the video ended. I had given her everything my family never gave me. A second chance, trust, opportunity, and she betrayed me anyway. The next morning I called the police. Part of me hated myself for it. Not because she didn't deserve consequences, but because somewhere deep inside, I still wished things could have been different between us. But I also understood something important now. Loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to destroy your life. The officers arrived during lunch service. Customers filled the dining room while servers rushed between tables carrying plates of food. Savannah was near the front desk when two officers approached her. "Savannah Mercer?" one officer asked. She smiled nervously. "Yes? We need to speak with you regarding an ongoing theft investigation." The color immediately drained from her face. "What are you talking about?" I stepped out of my office before the officer could answer. Her eyes locked onto mine instantly. Panic flashed across her expression. "Riley," she whispered. I crossed my arms calmly. "We have security footage," I said. For a moment, she just stared at me in disbelief. "You called the police on me? You stole from my company." Her breathing became uneven. "I can explain—" "No," I interrupted quietly. "I'm done listening to excuses." The officers placed handcuffs around her wrists right there in the middle of the restaurant, while customers and employees watched in stunned silence. Savannah started crying immediately. "You can't do this to me," she pleaded desperately. "I'm your sister." But for the first time in my life, those words didn't weaken me. Because family wasn't supposed to destroy you. Less than an hour later, my parents stormed into the restaurant. My father looked furious. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted the second he saw me. "You had your own sister arrested?" My mother followed close behind him, already crying dramatically. "She made a mistake," she said. "How could you humiliate her like this?" I stared at both of them calmly. The strange thing was that they hadn't changed at all. Even now, after everything, they still protected Savannah while treating me like the villain. "A mistake?" I repeated quietly. "The mistake was letting any of you back into my life." My father pointed at me angrily. "You've become heartless." I almost laughed. Heartless. After all the years they ignored me, used me, mocked me, and threw me away. Now suddenly I was the cruel one because I refused to be stolen from. "You don't get to judge me anymore," I said firmly. My mother stepped closer. "If you drop the charges, we can still fix this as a family." Family? That word used to hurt me. Now it just sounded empty. "There is no family," I replied. My father's face darkened with rage. "If you go through with this, then don't ever call yourself our daughter again." For a moment, silence filled the restaurant. Then something unexpected happened. I felt nothing. No heartbreak, no fear, no sadness. Just peace. Because after spending my whole life chasing their approval, I finally understood I never needed it. I looked directly at him. "Fine," I said calmly. "Pretend I never existed. You already did that years ago." My mother started crying harder while my father continued yelling threats about lawsuits and ruined reputations, but their voices barely registered anymore. It felt like watching strangers argue in the distance. Eventually, they stormed out of the restaurant carrying the same bitterness they had always carried. But this time, when the door closed behind them, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. A few months later, the trial began. I arrived early that morning because part of me wanted to see whether Savannah would finally tell the truth. Deep down, I already knew the answer. She walked into the courtroom looking polished and innocent, dressed in soft colors with perfect makeup and carefully styled hair. Anyone who didn't know her would have believed she was the victim. When she took the stand, her voice trembled dramatically. "I never meant to steal from my sister," she said while wiping fake tears from her eyes. "I was only borrowing the money temporarily." I clenched my jaw silently. "I plan to return it," she continued softly. But before I had the chance, Riley called the police on her own family. Several people in the courtroom glanced toward me. Years ago, those looks would have shattered me. Now I simply sat still and waited. Because unlike Savannah, I had evidence. Then the prosecutor stood up. "Miss Mercer," he said calmly, "isn't it true this is not the first time you've been accused of theft?" Savannah froze. The confidence vanished from her face instantly. I don't know what you mean." Right then, the courtroom doors opened, and a man walked inside, Savannah's former employer. The second she saw him, panic filled her eyes. He testified about everything: the stolen company funds, the internal investigation, and the lie Savannah created after getting caught. According to him, she falsely accused him of inappropriate behavior to avoid facing consequences for her theft. Gasps spread through the courtroom. Savannah looked completely cornered for the first time in her life. Then the prosecutor played recorded statements from former employees confirming the story was fabricated. Every lie she built started collapsing one piece at a time. When the judge finally delivered the verdict, Savannah was found guilty of theft and fraud. She completely lost control after hearing the sentence. She cried, begged, screamed. But nobody listened anymore. As officers moved to handcuff her, she turned toward me with pure hatred burning in her eyes. "You ruined my life," she hissed. I looked at her calmly for several long seconds. Then I answered honestly, "No, Savannah. You ruined it yourself." After the trial ended, I walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in years. Not happy exactly, because there was nothing joyful about watching your own family destroy themselves. But the constant weight I had carried since childhood was finally gone. For years, I kept hoping my family would change. I kept thinking maybe one day they would apologize. Maybe one day they would love me the way parents are supposed to love their child. Even after they threw me out, some small broken part of me still wanted their approval. But standing outside that courthouse, watching police cars drive Savannah away, I finally accepted the truth. Some people never change. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away for good. My parents tried contacting me several times after the trial. At first, they called nonstop. Then came long voicemail messages blaming me for everything that happened to Savannah. "You destroyed this family. She made mistakes, but she's still your sister. You could have helped her instead of ruining her future." I listened to exactly one voicemail before deleting the rest. Because for once in my life, I refused to carry guilt that didn't belong to me. Savannah made her own choices. My parents made theirs too. And I was finally done paying the price for all of them. A few months later, I changed my phone number completely. No more calls. No more messages. No more chances. I cut every remaining tie connecting me to the people who spent my entire life making me feel unwanted. And honestly, it felt peaceful. Instead of wasting energy on pain and resentment, I poured everything into my restaurants. Business continued growing faster than I ever imagined possible. By the 7th year after opening my first location, Mercer's Kitchen had expanded into 6 successful restaurants across Illinois. People started recognizing me publicly sometimes. Food magazines interviewed me, cooking channels invited me for features. Business organizations asked me to speak about entrepreneurship and resilience. The strangest part was hearing people describe me as inspiring, because they had no idea how invisible I used to feel. But success wasn't the best thing I gained from rebuilding my life. The best thing was the people. Grant became more than my head chef over the years. He became one of my closest friends. Elise stayed beside me through every expansion, every stressful opening, every difficult decision. My staff celebrated birthdays together, supported each other during hard times, and created the kind of loyalty I used to think only existed in movies. For the first time in my life, I finally understood something important. Real family isn't built through blood. It's built through respect, through kindness, through people choosing to stand beside you even when they don't have to. One night after closing, I sat alone inside my original restaurant long after everyone left. The lights were dim, soft music played quietly through the speakers, and the smell of fresh bread still lingered in the air from dinner service. I looked around slowly at the warm wooden tables, the framed photos on the walls, and the kitchen where my dream first came alive. Then I thought about the little girl I used to be. The girl who walked quietly through hallways trying not to annoy anyone. The girl who cleaned houses while other children played. The girl who believed she was impossible to love. I wished I could go back and tell her something. One day, none of this pain will control you anymore. One day, you'll build a life so beautiful that the people who tried breaking you won't even recognize the person you become. And most importantly, you'll finally realize you were never the problem. For most of my childhood, I believed being unwanted meant I had no value. But now I understand that someone else's inability to love you properly says more about them than it ever will about you. My parents spent years making me feel invisible. But in the end, I built something they never could. A life filled with purpose, a career created through hard work, and relationships built on genuine love instead of obligation. Sometimes people ask whether I regret cutting ties with my family. The answer is no, because walking away saved me. It allowed me to become the person I was always meant to be instead of remaining trapped inside a life built around rejection and pain. I used to think survival meant staying quiet enough to avoid conflict. Now I know real strength comes from finally choosing yourself. And if there's one thing my story proves, it's this. Your beginning does not decide your ending. No matter how unwanted, ignored, or broken you feel today, your future still belongs to you. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more powerful real-life stories about family, betrayal, success, and second chances. And if you've ever had to fight for your own worth like Riley did, share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else who feels invisible today.